Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinnells, and tonight we are going to be talking about the satanic side of Led Zeppelin. Now, this is a topic that we've kind of gone into before on our show about backmasking, and actually I'm going to play a clip from that show of the alleged backmasking in Stairway to Heaven, just to kind of catch everybody up in case you didn't happen to hear that episode the first time around. It was an early episode. But tonight we're going to delve into it in much more detail, and not just about the backmasking, but also some of the other allegations that have popped up, most specifically against Jimmy Page. Before we get into it too much, I do want to talk about last week's episode, the 100th episode of Spooky Ass Shit. And I'm glad that everyone was able to come. We had 4 guests, technically. Only Tom was here earlier, and then the other 3 came later. And of course, Fatima chose to sit on the couch and remain silent, aside from saying hello and goodbye to everybody. But she was technically here, so I guess that makes it 5 guests in total. I hope you all enjoyed that episode. Let me know what you thought about having 3 people on mic at a time. If you liked it, maybe it's something we can look into doing more often. And of course, I want to remind everyone to check out the website, spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. They both take you to the same place. That is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to each and every episode, all 101 episodes of Spooky AS, and you can also find links to our social media. We are at Spooky Ass Shit on both Twitter and Instagram, and you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. Now, going back to last week's episode, it was a supersized episode. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it was over an hour and a half, right? I don't know. It was pretty long. But that creates a little bit of an issue because you only get so much space per month on your podcast hosting plan. So this is actually going to be kind of a shorter episode. We'll see how long it ends up being, but it could be as short as maybe 20 minutes or so. But don't worry, it's kind of just balancing out the longer episode that we did. This happens from time to time. You guys know how it is. Sometimes you get the full 40 minutes. Sometimes you get longer than that. Sometimes you get shorter than that. This is a one-man operation. I can only do so much to please you people, and I hope it's working. All right, with all that out of the way, I would like to now play for you a clip from an old episode featuring myself and Brian Toney talking about backmasking. That is when they allegedly record hidden messages in rock and roll music, and if you play the record backwards, you can hear what they're really saying. And of course, most of the time they say it's a satanic message. Now, is this even possible? We'll get into that. But for now, here's a clip of Brian, Toney, and myself discussing backmasking, specifically as it relates to Led Zeppelin. So the reason that the Christian groups became concerned about all this backmasking that they thought was going on was because they began to claim that backmasked messages could bypass the conscious mind and reach into your subconscious, where you would be unknowingly accepting the messages that it's giving to you.
All right.
And possibly leading you into a life of sin.
Sounds deeply scientific.
And even possible devil worship.
Well, sure.
If some of these bands had their way.
Okay, but they came to it later? They came to it after the Beatles?
Yeah,
or
this was
did
in
they
the late 70s. Yep.
The late 70s. But did they go back and
Oh yes, because
and find the Beatles stuff and like, oh, this is
not just the Beatles.
That.
There was a lot of classic rock songs. Perhaps most famously, in this song, which I'm not even going to tell you what song it is. Here's what I'm going to do first, okay? This is the one that I recorded myself, hoping to avoid any cease and desist lawsuits, okay?
Eric making his own Satan jams.
So listen to the track and tell me what words, if anything, you think you can pick out. Okay.
Did you
get
Is
anything?
that it? I got absolutely nothing.
Okay.
Like there were certain syllables that I thought might be going somewhere, but they were only syllables.
Okay. Well, I posted this on Facebook to do a
Okay.
very super scientific experiment.
Yes.
I posted on Facebook and I said basically the same thing I just said. I said, please listen to this track and tell me what words, phrases, or sentences you may be able to pick out, if any.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say why or anything. That's all I did. And then I posted the track. And a bunch of people said they could hear the words "my mother."
Really?
Pretty much everyone, either they said they couldn't hear anything, or if they said they heard anything, they all agreed that they could hear "my mother."
Okay.
And then a couple people had some other words that they could find. Someone said they heard Red sing. Someone said love. Jenny Blades was being a smartass and said, I buried Paul. And then, yeah, mother.
I mean, I kind of heard red, but that's just a syllable. Like,
Yeah. Everybody said mother that responded.
it's weird.
That said they heard it. So now let me give you a list of words.
Oh, okay.
And because when I listen to it, knowing what the real version is supposed to contain, I don't hear everything that the real version is supposed to contain.
Mm-hmm.
But I do hear certain words. So let me tell you these words, and then we're going to listen to it again and see if you can pick out these words.
Okay.
Okay? Sweet. Satan. My mother made a bad boy.
Such a complete thought.
His power is Satan.
His power is Satan.
My mother, who suffers their fate.
Oh,
Now, those
geez.
aren't all supposed to be together necessarily, except for the ones that I read together.
Yeah.
But you're supposed to be here. You might be able to hear all of those things
All right.
as you listen. So now that you know those words, which were sweet, Satan, my mother made a bad boy,
That's my favorite.
his power is Satan, my mother, who suffers their fate.
Okay.
So
Let's
6
go.
different things to listen for. They're in that order, but not necessarily right next to each
So
other.
my mother's in there twice, theoretically. Wow. All right. Yeah. So this time I heard the areas that were supposed to sound like that. They still didn't sound like. I can pick it out.
Sure.
I can pick out.
If you were stretching, you could say, yeah.
I can pick out the part with the my favorite one. I picked that one out. Made a bad boy. I heard that. I heard like half of Satan. It was
Okay.
like Satan, and then it
Right.
stopped.
So what I did was I presented those words on Facebook as well. I made that list. And the mother stuff I included because people said they could hear it, and I could sort of hear it too. So that's when I made the list. But then people said they could definitely hear my mother. And then when they looked at the words, one woman said, "I only heard my mother the first time, but when I saw your other post, and then listened to it again, I heard my mother made a bad boy." And then another person said they could hear "Who suffers their fate," as well as my mother. Everyone agreed my mother was in there. I just
Are we
realized how
allowed to
far
say
away.
what song this is supposed to be, or?
I'm gonna. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna play it for you. Do you know? Do you have a guess?
Well, no, I don't even know what time period we're in at this
Okay.
point. You say it's one of the most famous examples of this?
Oh, yeah.
though? All right. Is it Judas Priest?
No.
Oh, okay. So
Ready?
that's the one I know.
Here it is. Forward.
If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now.
How about that?
It's just a sprinkling for the May Queen.
See, I never knew that.
Yes,
this
there
song was-
are 2 paths you can go by, but in the long run,
Don't judge my singing. huh?
there's still time to change the road you're on.
He doesn't
I
hold
also
that
didn't
note
know
out
that those
either.
were the words to that song.
Going to the internet.
I believe it.
But listen, so what's interesting is when you play that backwards on the original version,
It's a little more believable.
what he says, they say, is, "Here's to my sweet Satan, the one whose little path would make me sad, whose power is Satan.
Yeah.
He will give those with him 666. and this is my favorite part. There was a little tool shed where he made us suffer. Sad Satan.
Wait, I
Now,
have
if
so many
anything-
questions
If
right
anything,
now.
that sounds anti-Satan to me.
I have a lot of questions. So apparently our subconscious can be permeated by like really bad sentence structure and things that make zero sense. I don't understand. Like where does someone create this, or where does it begin in someone's head? Like I understand that the Christian right probably didn't enjoy a lot of this rock and roll music and
Yeah.
just were looking for a reason to not enjoy it actively even more. But how do you get into, oh, this is what it sounds like backwards? I feel like they must have heard it somewhere.
Well, okay, so I don't know exactly. There's no complete history
connective
of
tissue.
like, oh, this is when. Now, whether the backmasking was true or not, as Robert Plant said, it's hard enough to write a song forward, let alone trying to write one backwards and forward. So obviously in the clip I made my personal opinions quite clear that I did not feel this was anything. Although some of the words do sound like what they say they sound like, but again, purely coincidental. If you listen to things long enough, I'm sure you can find strange little things and everything. It does tell us there, in that alleged backmasking, what the legend of Led Zeppelin is supposed to be. And from here, it would go off the rails. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, especially in the case of Jimmy Page, he wasn't really helping his cause. If he wanted the band to be known as non-satanic or even non-occultic, because he definitely did some things that definitely were occultic at the very least. See how we've adopted that word now? Thanks to Deception of a Generation. Don't forget to call in with your special offer code, Child Deception Offer. All right, anyway, so according to the legend in the hidden messages backmasked into Stairway to Heaven, the group is confessing to selling their souls to Satan. It mentions, of course, that the deal was done, quote, in a little tool shed, and that the devil made them suffer before or after the deal was done. I'm not sure. It's a little unclear. Or maybe during. Maybe that's how they sealed the deal. It is said that the only member of the group who refused to sell his soul was John Paul Jones. Now, I found that kind of weird because I was like, well, why are people giving him a pass? But apparently he's known to be the nice, normal dude who is strangely absent from most of the crazy Led Zeppelin stories that you might hear. And this apparently is true. In real life, John Paul Jones was not a big partier like some of the other guys kind of were. He wasn't really into drugs and all that. Like, he would go to the cities and he says that he would do touristy kind of things, or at least just kind of walk around and see what was around the hotel and kind of just hang out and really kind of try to experience the town, while the rest of the guys were kind of doing the more normal rock star type things. So apparently that's where that idea that John Paul Jones is the normal one came from. So he would refuse to do the deal with Satan. So I guess that kind of worked out for him, because if the rest of them do the deal and then they make all this money, the band makes all this money, and he still gets to be a part of it, that's not bad. Now, like I said, Jimmy Page is really the troublemaker here, if you want to call it trouble, because he is said to be the center of it all. He's accused of being a Satanist, but to this day, he has never admitted that he is or was a Satanist. But he also has never flat out denied it. So, a lot of people are saying, well, this is kind of good PR for the group. They're kind of a mysterious group. I don't know about you. When I was growing up, I was kind of a throwback. I liked older music. I liked rock and roll. I was a big, rock and roll and heavy rock and heavy metal guy. And then punk when I got into college. But anyway, I was really into, for example, The Who. I was super into The Who when I was in high school, which was not a popular group to be into by the time I was in high school. But Led Zeppelin, obviously they've got some great songs, some classics, but they never really grabbed me in that way, because at the time, talking about when I was in middle school, high school, when I first started really listening to music and focusing on rock and roll and that kind of thing, I just thought they were a little too a little too kind of ethereal, I guess I would say. A little too Dungeons and Dragons. You know, I liked a little bit more humor. I liked a little bit of a rougher edge, maybe. So now I listen to it and I can appreciate more of their music maybe than I did then. But that was kind of my feeling. I don't know. I know they're considered one of the greatest bands in the world, and of course some of their songs are, I mean, Stairway to Heaven, there's no way around it. That's like the national anthem of rock and roll. The only, you know, I won't even get into it, but that's kind of the song that could be played at the beginning or end of every concert. And I've heard so many people say that's the song they always played at the last song of the dance. And that was true even in my time, and we're talking several decades after that song came out when I was in high school. And yet it was still the last song played. I have very specific memories of dancing to that song. I'll get into that another day. Amy, if you're listening, how you doing? All right, getting back to Jimmy Page. Now, he was very open about being a fan of Aleistar Crowley, the most evil man, the most wicked man in the world. I'm not going to go too much into him, although he would actually probably be a pretty good episode on his own. But he was an English occultist around the turn of the century, the last century, I mean, and philosopher and practitioner of black magic. He wrote several books. He called himself the most wicked man, and he called himself the Beast 666. So he does have a form of Satanism. Again, that's not really the point of today's episode, but in any event, what he mostly was pushing for was that you alone were the center of your own universe. That there's no God that you need to worry about, and that you should do what you feel is right. So Jimmy Page took this to heart, and he was kind of obsessed with Aleistar Crowley. He called him a misunderstood genius and said that he inspired him to look into himself and discover his true self and his personal motivations. So, like, why did he want the things that he wanted? Why was he doing the things that he did? This caused him to look into himself and live kind of what you might call a hedonistic lifestyle. Because if you're unrestrained, then you're doing what you want, you're doing things because you want to do them, well, then you might get into a little bit of debauchery or hedonism, a little earthly pleasure, you might say. He also was so obsessed with him that he bought one of Crowley's former homes. And he said, this house is definitely haunted. But he also went on to say that it's not haunted because of Crowley. In fact, it was haunted long before he moved in. There are bad vibes in the home that have nothing to do with Crowley. He said that there were owners before him and that you could hear a ghostly head that had been severed rolling down the stairs, and there's a couple other ghosts that he was talking about. But basically he said he had moved into this haunted mansion, and yeah, it was haunted, and yeah, it had some bad vibes, but no, it wasn't because of Crowley. It was stuff that went on before that. Now, on the Led Zeppelin III album, Jimmy Page asked for Crowley's motto, "Do what thou will," to be inscribed on the runoff groove of the album. So if you know, like in the if you kids listening, we used to have these things called records. This was even maybe a little bit before my time, although I did have some records growing up. I'm old enough to have gotten some records. But anyway, big round things made out of vinyl, and there was a label in the middle, and next to the label was a little smooth area before the groove started. In that little smooth area, that was like the runoff area. And sometimes you would see numbers or something etched onto them. On Led Zeppelin III, on the original pressings, you can see the motto, "Do what thou will," etched in that little area. And apparently he wanted even more of Crowley's quotes. That's hard to say. Crowley's quote to be inscribed on there, but it wouldn't fit. So you just get "Do what thou will." But that is the main teaching of Aleistar Crowley. Well, the most famous anyway. He might not consider it his main teaching. Enough about that guy. We'll get into him another day. So these are the confirmed details. These are things that actually happened. Yes, he was into Crowley. Yes, he bought the house that Crowley had lived in. Yes, he claimed it was haunted, although it had nothing to do with Crowley himself. And yes, he did inscribe Crowley's motto into Led Zeppelin III. But there are many, many conspiracy-type theories out there listing further connections, like the fact that the sun keeps coming up in Led Zeppelin work, and also Jimmy Page using... he very famously would use a violin bowstring to play his guitar in concert sometimes. Now, some people are claiming that this was actually part of a black magic ritual, and that he was performing these rituals live on stage and enslaving his fans using his magic wand, which would be the bow. As for Jimmy Page himself, when he was asked about it, again, like I said, he was kind of non-committal either way. Although, it's not necessarily just that this was a way to kind of exploit notoriety or get a little infamy for the group. Let's just consider the fact that this is, perhaps, honestly, how the guy felt. This was his quote on the matter. He says, quote, "I don't really want to go on about my personal beliefs or my involvement in magic. I'm not interested in turning anybody on to anybody that I'm turned on to. If people want to find things, they find them themselves." That's from an article in Rolling Stone. So he was basically saying there, hey, look, if you want to figure out, it's not my job to turn people on to things, okay? Let's just say, for example, he was talking about Aleistar Crowley. He doesn't mention it there, but if he was talking about Aleistar Crowley, he's saying, well, if you're interested in that kind of thing, you'll find it. It's not up to me to tell you about it. You'll find it. So now, perhaps someone who was anti-Led Zeppelin might say, well, yes, but of course you are luring them in because you're putting these little secret messages on your albums and you're inscribing your albums with their motto, so people are going to say, where did that come from? I'm going to look that up. And then they look it up and they find Aleistar Crowley, and then they're turned on to the Beast 666, and they become Satanists, all thanks to Led Zeppelin and your magical violin bow. Now we move on to Led Zeppelin IV, or the album also known as Zoso, or known as, more technically accurately, the Untitled Album. This is the album where, on the cover and inside the album, there are 4 symbols, the first of which appears to say Zoso in stylized lettering, and then you have a circle with these kind of leafy shapes sticking out of it. I'm sure there's more technical terms, but we're not getting into all of them. Then you have the 3 interlocking circles, and then you have the circle with the feather in it. Now, what happened here is Jimmy Page claims in another interview that this was because they were trying to come up with a name for the album and they couldn't really think of one that they liked. And then they said, wait, let's give it a really ambiguous name. And then they kind of said, maybe just a symbol. And then they said, wait a minute, there's 4 of us. This is the 4th album. Why don't we each pick out our own symbol and we'll put it on the cover, and that will be, kind of the representation of the name of the album. So it doesn't officially have a title, it'll just be these symbols. So Jimmy Page picked out the Zoso symbol. That's what we'll call it, even though he claims that's not really what it is. But it depends who you ask what this symbol means. But there's people out there with all kinds of theories as to the meaning of this Zoso symbol. Some people say it is actually the name of another follower of Aleistar Crowley. This was kind of a nickname that the guy had, and this was Jimmy Page's nod to him. Some people claim that it's a stylized version of 666, the number of the beast, which, by the way, is actually a mistranslation. It's actually not 666, but again, we'll get into that another day. Now, Jimmy Page claims that these aren't actually letters at all. They're not supposed to be letters at all. It's just a symbol. He claims he designed his symbol himself. But again, here's where a little mystery gets added to it, a little bit of intrigue, because, he claims he just made up this symbol. But it's actually a symbol that has existed since 1557, and it was used to represent the planet Saturn. Now, Saturn is the ruling planet in Jimmy Page's astrological sun sign, Capricorn. So this is perhaps one of the reasons he might have chosen it. But Page himself has never publicly disclosed a reason for choosing this symbol. Now let's give Jimmy himself a break for a moment and talk about one of the most infamous symbols associated with that Led Zeppelin, and that is the fallen angel symbol. This is on a lot of the posters. My brother had one of these on a tapestry when we were growing up, on a tie-dyed tapestry. This is the angel-looking figure with his wings outstretched, and he's kind of bent over backwards with one hand raised high above his head, and the other hand seems to be supporting his head or perhaps on his back. And it does appear to be an angel falling. So a lot of people have said that this is them showing Satan, their allegiance to Satan, because, of course, Satan is the fallen angel in Christian mythology. And he was also the light bearer. There's a sun behind him, and you can see he's falling down. He was supposed to be the angel of the morning back in the day, but he refused to serve man and then attempted to take over the kingdom of heaven. So he was banished, and he fell. He fell from heaven. He was pushed from heaven by the archangel Michael, and that this is their nod to him. Now, a lot of people will say, no, this is not supposed to represent Satan. This is actually supposed to represent Apollo. Other people say, no, this is definitely supposed to represent Icarus. And I believe that is what the band themselves have said, although I don't have exact confirmation on that. But most people who are supporters of the band and the fact that they're not satanic will say, no, this is not Satan. This is Icarus flying too close to the sun. His wings are melting, and that's what's happening here. Well, maybe, but the thing is, this symbol is based off of a painting by a British artist named William Reamer, and the painting is entitled Evening, Fall of the Day. Sorry. Evening, Fall of Day. Nova. And most art historians agree that this is actually supposed to be the fall of Satan, Lucifer, the light bearer. This is actually what it's supposed to represent. So Led Zeppelin might have a hard time talking themselves out of that. By the way, if you would like to see this artwork, it is on display at the Museum of Fine Arts right here in Boston. So come visit. Now, my question to you, Spookaroos. Does it matter to you if Led Zeppelin is a band that has some kind of satanic leaning? If you are a Christian or a member of another religion that does not mess with the devil, then you might say, yes, it does matter. And if I had known they were satanic, I would not listen to it. I would not have danced to it at the school dances. And some of you might just say, I don't care what people are into. If the music's good, that's fine by me. I like it. Doesn't matter what they might actually believe. So to each their own on that point. But when I was looking up information to record this episode, I did come across a website that had very strong feelings. In fact, I came across several websites, but this one was my favorite. This is a website called Jesus is Savior. And there's a page there written by a guy named David Stewart. And he starts off with maybe one of the best opening sentences I've ever heard. Quote, "Please understand that I do not condemn anyone, for the Bible condemns us all as guilty, dirty, rotten, hell-deserving sinners." End quote. Well, all right, I guess we can guess where this one's going to be going. Now, he's got a whole long page, and honestly, the problem is I wanted to really look at some of the perhaps fundamentalist or evangelical Christian point of views that might point out why you should not listen to Led Zeppelin and what's wrong with it and all that. But really, they don't necessarily all agree on one thing or another. They just kind of have a general icky feeling about the band. And then they come up with these theories which are really tangential, and I've already mentioned like the things that kind of come up a lot, and if you look at it, makes a little bit of sense, but there's way more out there that is just off the wall, but it's so hard to describe what the hell they're trying to get at that I don't even really want to bring it up here on this show, because I would just get confused talking and around 5 different topics that they're trying to piece together. So I didn't go through all that, but there was another quote from this particular article that I liked. Quote, "Anyone who has ever heard Dazed and Confused by Led Zeppelin has taken a spiritual journey to hell. The song is evil and is still used extensively today by Satanists during occult rituals." Well, I don't know. My Satanist friends out there, you got to let me know. Is Dazed and Confused one of your main jams? It's not a bad song, but it's not, I would think maybe more like Good Times, Bad Times, something like that. Might be a little more up the excitement and spirit of the activities. All right, folks. Well, like I said, this is kind of a mini episode to make up for our extended, extra long episode for our 100th episode. So once again, I want to thank you all for listening, and thank you for your understanding on these episodes coming out a little bit less frequently, a little bit later here and there. A large part of that does have to do with my broken ankle, which is still in recovery. In fact, I went to the doctor the other day. I thought it was only going to be 4 more weeks of recovery. He told me it's going to be more like 6 at least. Oh, joy. But the good news is, for those of you who care, I am in a cast, but only for just a little over 2 more weeks. And then I have my next appointment. He's going to cut off this cast, and hopefully, as long as everything goes well, and it has so far, as long as everything goes well, he's going to cut this cast off, and I will never have to wear the cast again. I'll just be in a boot for the next 4 weeks or whatever after that. So that's some good news, bad news. But I really appreciate your patience with everything, and I really appreciate you sharing the show, if you would, and following us on Facebook, facebook.com/spookyas, checking out the website, spookyasshit.com or spookyas.com. Twitter, I'm not so good at, but Instagram, I try to post every once in a while to keep it interesting over there, so please do follow us on those places. And, of course, if you could write a review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever else you listen, I would truly, truly appreciate that. It really, I cannot say enough. I feel like I've said it a million times, but when I do the show by myself, and, some weeks people are very active on Facebook or in email, and they'll email and make comments or questions or suggestions, and I love to hear from everybody. But some weeks, it's a little quieter, and you just kind of wonder, like, man, I put so much work into this, and I don't know if people are enjoying it. I don't know. So it really helps to keep the show going, to keep me motivated when you write those nice 5-star reviews. Like I said, however you happen to listen to, whatever app you happen to listen to it in, if they give you an option to rate and review the show, I ask that you please do that, and please 5 stars. As for Led Zeppelin, my final thoughts closing in here, I'm kind of in the camp that I don't really care what people believe if I like the music and if the message isn't too audacious. Like, if I found out that The Who were a group of neo-Nazis, or pedophiles, which, did come up, that would taint my view of them. Pete Townsend was acquitted on charges, by the way. But anyway, that would taint things. But if I just found out that they were a different religion, no, that wouldn't. And I know some people would say, well, Satanism is not only just a different religion, a religion that needs to be respected. No, it's evil. It's evil. They're trying to send people to hell. Well, okay, but I don't believe in all that stuff. So, to me, that doesn't really make a difference to me. And if someone is into black magic and all that, again, I don't really believe in that stuff. So, if whatever floats your boat, go for it. Do as thou will, as Aleistar Crowley might say. That is my 5-second answer. Not a very nuanced response. I do have a more nuanced response, but we'll get into that another time if you really want to debate the existence of heaven and hell and black magic and all that kind of stuff. I'll tell you this. My answer is not as simple as a flat no in the belief of all of those things. But if you want a quick answer, the quick answer for me, in my belief system, is no. Which means you are allowed to enjoy Led Zeppelin as much as you want. Even though they are a little Dungeons and Dragons-y. Until next time, don't be afraid.